What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get all into the topic for today, I would love it if you did a few things for me. Hit the like button, the subscribe button, the share button, and the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you are finished watching this video, leave me a comment below. That way I can get back to whatever it is that you had to say on the topic for today. For today's topic, I want to talk about the humanized white supremacist serial killer trope. And this is a topic that I did a poll on YouTube, and y'all voted on this. And this is the one that ended up winning from the 4 choices. So let's get into it. I've seen this pattern in a lot of television shows, in movies, and even to some extent in anime, where you have this character who is essentially a serial killer. And generally they have certain characteristics as well too. They're usually a white male or they're white. And if they're not white, they're white passing. And this character also has certain traits about them as well too, on top of them being a serial killer that's supposed to give them some sort of character. And the reason why I call this character a humanized white supremacist serial killer is they're a white supremacist because essentially they do what a lot of white supremacists in the dominant society do, which is that they mass murder. This is a part of their the white supremacist ideology. It's genocide. Now, genocide for their own means, genocide for their own benefits. Now, when we talk about humanized, and the reason why we say humanized is because this is an individual who has been made to seem human despite doing things that only a monster would do. Whenever somebody thinks about a serial killer in real life, they think about somebody who is heinous, somebody who is inhumane, somebody who doesn't do things that a typical person would do, therefore, again, making them a monster. But these types of depictions make this person human. They show this person's flaws. They show this person's origin story. They show all the other issues that came with this person. They show their backstory. They do all these different things so you understand this character, and even to some extent conflate it with their motivations to kill. Now, they do it a little bit different. There's a little swagger in how they do it differently for each of these different things I'm about to talk about. But there are five different media depictions, or I guess you could say media creations, that depict this type of trope. So you have the show Dexter, you have the show You have the show Hannibal, and then you have the movie Joker. And the last thing, the fifth thing that I would say where this trope has been portrayed is in the anime series called Death Note. And in Death Note, that's why I said that there is this idea that sometimes that individual can be white passing, because I've gone back and forth with somebody on Instagram about this, but when I said that Light Yagami falls into this category, they tried to argue me down to say Light Yagami is Asian, so he doesn't count. The reality is that if you look at Light Yagami, he looks white. So you could say that he's Asian. You can even go back to the manga where they depict that he was Asian. But the reality is that most people are not going to look at the manga, or at least more people are going to look at the anime than they are going to look at the manga. And my point with that is if you look at the actual anime, he looks white passing, and so does his father as well too. You wouldn't really look at him and say, oh, that is definitely an Asian man. It may be disputable. Some people may say, some features look like this, some features look like that, but a good consensus of people, if they saw Light Yagami, would think that he was a white man. And it's also not far-fetched to believe that they were trying to depict him as such, because if you look at a lot of Japanese anime, there is this desire for them to portray white people in their lore, even if everything around them and where they live at and their habits, even if they are things that a typical Asian, or in this case Japanese person, would do. Just look at Dragon Ball Z. You have characters like Goku, characters like Vegeta, characters like Gohan, and they are extremely white appearing. None of them appear Asian whatsoever, but you see them whenever they're having a feast. They're eating with chopsticks out of bowls. They're eating rice. They're eating all types of stuff that they would typically eat in Asian cultures, not in white American cultures. So I say all that to basically say they love to depict white people in their lore doing things that people who are Asian would do in their culture. So it's not far-fetched. In the case of Dexter, he's another good example, but I think that with Dexter, they try to lean more into the whole thing of him being relatable, him being justified and human because other people have their own issues, or other people, once again, are worse. That's why a common theme in Dexter was pointing out that he was the same or similar to somebody else who was heinous. Like you had the villain of season 3, which I think his name was Miguel, and Miguel was out here doing dirt and killing people and stuff like that, and he was trying to say him and Dexter were the same. So they try to make him relatable by giving him a best friend who was similar. And then you had in season 4 where you had the Trinity Killer, where he was killing like women and other people too in certain ways. Like he was basically getting, it was kind of strange. He was getting women naked, and he was getting in the bathtub naked with the women, and he was cutting their I think it's called the femoral artery, or I think that's how you say it, the femoral artery, like, which was like right by where their leg is at. And you know, and basically that was a pattern of the way that he was actually killing his victims. And then there was even a point where he ended up killing Dexter's love interest, whose name was Rita. And he killed her in the same way that he killed other women as well too. So they try to make them relatable because Dexter is like, okay, so he's a serial killer just like me, and here he is living a normalized life. How can I relate to this dude and then at the same time think about trying to kill him, especially when he's starting to kill people who are around me and I work in this police union. The other thing that they've tried to do too is they try to bring him other things, such as in season 5, they tried to say, okay, well, maybe Dexter can get the killer out of him if he gets into motivational speaking, or he ends up listening to motivational speakers. Or season 6, where they try to say, well, let's bring Dexter some Jesus because all he needs is Jesus and we can just get rid of it. So they're trying to do things to make him relatable, and even trying to some extent cure the serial killer in him so he can now live a normal life. So the whole idea is to make him seem like he's human and he's somebody who had a horrible thing happen to him. Now, one thing that I find very interesting in the Dexter series is that they also did this thing where, and I see this quite a bit when it comes to a lot of these TV shows and movies, where they have a character who is usually a black male and they make them angry and they make them overbearing and they make them just a total asshole. And they make it to the point where this person seems just blinded by rage. They can't see straight. They can't think straight, and they're just almost mentally ill because of the fact that they can't seem to control themselves or their emotions. And they do this, I would call it this Drapetomania type of gimmick. And what they like to do is they like to take a black male who is very, again, aggressive, and make it so that this black male seems like they're just off their rocker, or every time you see them, they seem like they have a chip on their shoulder. And it almost comes off like something is wrong with them. And as a result, none of the characters in the show, or most of the characters, don't believe in their plight or the thing that they are saying, or they're basically are villainized to a certain extent. They're made to be the antagonist. But the reality is that oftentimes this character is actually right, and they actually are onto what the real problem is in whatever TV show or movie that they're in. And then as a result, they try to get rid of this character very quickly. So good examples of this would be Bushmaster, who was in, Luke Cage. You also had Killmonger. He probably is the best example of this in Black Panther. And then in the case of Dexter, you have James Doakes. James Doakes was this black man he was real fit. He's real muscular. He was, like a very aggressive man. He was calling out a lot of bullshit. He from the get-go was one of the first people to say, something ain't right about this Dexter cat. And he would tell people over and over again, something ain't right about him. But then everybody tried to make it seem like he was angry, or he was over the top, or he was doing the most with Dexter. He would pull little schemes to try to get Dexter, like such as where he planted this thing where Dexter would try to meet up with somebody because he was going to try to do one of his killings. And then, Dexter ended up coming up to the spot, and he went to this warehouse basically expecting for the person who was doing dirt, person who he's going to off to be there. And then he opens like the doors to this warehouse, and there's a bunch of crates of bananas and shit like that. And then Doakes shows up, and he's like, "Gotcha!" And then he's like beating Dexter's ass and shit, which I ain't gonna lie, I was cracking up when I first saw it. I thought that shit was funny as hell. But here's the thing. The reason why they were doing that is they were trying to make this man, James Doakes, a blaxploitation type of character. Like, I'm gonna get you, cracker. Like, trying to put him into that type of light where he was kind of saying that type of thing, right? And so they do this often where, they are able to track, this black character is able to track when somebody who is in the dominant society is about to do something that they really should not be doing. And the reason why we call this the Drapetomania gimmick is because in this instance, you have a black male character who is trying to, in so many words, escape colonization. You have a character who basically says that, hey, there's some shit that ain't right here, and I'm going to speak up about it if nobody else does. And as a result of speaking up about it, generally aggressively, the whole idea is for people to basically say this person is mentally ill, and as a result of being mentally ill, they need to go. We've got to get rid of this person. So they tend to get rid of this quote unquote angry Negro because the problem is their anger, not the fact that they're right and they're trying to convince everybody that something is off. In this case, he identified the white supremacist and he tried to neutralize the white supremacist. And as a result, he got told he was angry and it almost got pinned on him. Matter of fact, it did get pinned on him. And Doakes was basically about to go down, but he ended up actually getting killed. Drapetomania was a concept that was started by Samuel Cartwright in 1851. And this basically was a diagnosis that he created, and it's a fake mental illness. And it basically stated that African people who want to run away from colonization are considered mentally ill and not normal. And so that ideal has been placed onto black men, especially when they rebel against some type of slavery concept or some type of concept that the dominant society puts on the world around them. They tend to speak up about these things or do something about it. And slaves back in the day also did that as well too. So a slave who wanted to escape colonization or fight back against it was seen as somebody who was mentally ill. And they create a modern day version in this with a lot of these types of characters. This is important, especially in a show like Dexter, where although there's no concept of black people are being treated this way, and I'm not saying James Doakes was some type of civil rights warrior, so I want to make it very clear. But what I am saying is that there was this level of identifying and trying to neutralize a white supremacist serial killer who was getting away with what he was doing and nobody was onto him. Him being the first person to be onto him, but he was seen as the angry Negro who wasn't in his right mind. Matter of fact, think about when the Maria character was saying that the problem is that you don't even smile anymore. So now they done wrote in a whole relationship that she had with this dude, which wasn't really fully portrayed throughout the series. And as if that was a piece of a way for them to basically say, hey, even she recognizes that this dude is not there the way that he needs to be. So it's putting this constant idea of being mentally ill onto this black man as if he's not in his right mind. Now, you also have shows like Hannibal that's based on a true story, or based on true stories, I guess, in this case, because you had this thing in the dominant society where a lot of them were into cannibalism. They were into eating people and shit. Like, that was like a big thing. And so that was based on a true story, but it still at the same time was showing a level of humanized white supremacy, because you had this Hannibal character who essentially was portraying himself as a thorough psychologist who wanted to help people and also wanted to help solve crimes, while also trying to not link things back to the fact that he was involved in the majority of the crimes that basically were being committed. So they also had this thing where Hannibal was seen as somebody who was also made to seem like he had a lot of good traits. You know, Hannibal was actually, they went even the extra mile, in my opinion, with his personality, because at least with Joe, there was a level of almost delusion, where he was like mentally aware. He was just seeing things that just weren't real. With Dexter, there was this idea of him being very socially awkward. But Hannibal, he was much different. See, Hannibal was socially aware. Hannibal was very in tune with himself. Hannibal had great communication skills. Hannibal seemed normal. Matter of fact, I'll go as far to say that Hannibal was not only emotionally intelligent, but maybe even caring. And one could even say loving. And you could see that in his personality. They were making it seem like this dude was a normal dude who just liked to eat people. He would have folks over for dinner, and he would cook them these exquisite ass meals. So you had this dude who now was made to seem like he wasn't as bad as his choices made him seem, because here he is, a dude who has helped tons of people as a therapist, as a psychologist, as somebody who has literally helped detectives try to find people who were killers outside of himself. But at the same time, they were trying to show that he was quote unquote flawed by him doing killings and by him eating people, and even in some cases becoming somewhat of a mentor to other killers. So they also did that with him. You also have, again, in Joker, and I've said this before, I've actually said this in a couple different videos, where the Joker was the humanized white supremacist serial killer. And I explained that what they were trying to do with his character before was they were trying to make it seem like he was justified in his actions because everybody around him was just so terrible. Everybody was treating him like shit. He was getting his ass beat. Every time that he tried to, just live, nobody would let him be. His mama was abusing him. His daddy was absent. And I told you before, he said, I'm living the life of a nigga. And so when other people watch this, they're not seeing that the Joker is pissed because he's basically saying, I done lived the life of a nigga. What they're seeing is a dude who has been treated in an unkind way. So they're seeing that this dude is somebody who has been, tortured, somebody who has been, who was depressed because of his circumstances. And they try to turn into some weird message of just be kind to other people, or else these white supremacists are going to go and they're going to start knocking folks over. And that is exactly what the Joker did. Matter of fact, the only reason why the Joker ended up getting to that point in doing that is because he tried to cash in on what he thought to be his last white supremacy chip. And what he tried to do was go to Thomas Wayne and basically say, yo, I'm your son. So where's the money at? Where's the wealth at? Where's the better living conditions at? And when Thomas Wayne had basically said, no, I don't want to have nothing to do with that. Your mama, she might have been a pass around, but you ain't mine. That's when he said, I'm going to go off of my rocker and I'm just going to go ahead and start picking off people who have treated me in a bad way or who continue to treat me in a bad way going forward. So that's basically what they were trying to say. So any of the other characters too that weren't fully white were, in this case, substitutes for Negroes. So even like the Murray character was, his name, if you really look at it, could be associated with somebody who is Jewish. And in that case, they're basically making it so that you're not a white person. So it's, again, a substitute for somebody who is black in this case. In the show Death Note, they really try to lean heavy into the fact that Light Yagami was a justice seeker. And as a result, he was killing off people who were actual criminals who really deserved to die. He was the writer of everybody's fate. And he was selfish enough to also use other people in the process. So when you show these characters who have actually done bad things, have done horrible things, then it's like, yeah, like it makes people feel like, yeah, Light should have just knocked this person off. But at the same time, if you look, sometimes Light wouldn't just kill off people who were bad. He would kill off people who were onto him, which is also similar to what Hannibal would do as well, too. Hannibal would at times kill people who were onto him or his schemes. Light did the same thing. So I'm seeing a pattern of that also being a thing as well, too, where you have this character where somebody is onto them and all of a sudden that moral code that they had, it went out the window. So it's not about just killing people in the name of justice. It's killing people who also are onto you trying to create justice. So in other words, now, you can't lock me up. You're not going to lock me up so I can't, continue to do justice. It's a part of that, again, white vigilantism, which basically is that you can do what you're doing, but if you get caught, well, you can do what you're doing and it's justifiable. But if you get caught, it's okay to do something unjustifiable, such as neutralizing somebody so that they don't catch you in the act of doing something you shouldn't have been doing in the first damn place. So there's a lot of that was going on as well too, with both Death Note and also Hannibal. The main thing that I want you all to get from this trope, though, is that it actually appears in real life too. This is not just something that they're doing for entertainment and to try to just change your mind about the way you think about serial killers. They're actually doing it in real life, and you actually see real examples of it. And one of the examples that I actually brought up of this is Kyle Rittenhouse. If you look at Kyle Rittenhouse, they were basically trying to mimic that in the second Joker movie. They tried to show the dominant society, the dominant society viewers, that is, a blueprint of how they should behave if they do something like the Joker. And they used the Kyle Rittenhouse example to justify that. Because again, Kyle Rittenhouse was this boy who had committed a crime, killing a bunch of white people while attempting to kill black people. And then, using different police to say, it was self-defense, he was just a boy and all this other stuff so that he can still, get off and maybe even get a lesser sentence or reap the benefits that the dominant society basically would have for him, in spite of him committing murders. The Joker was placed in the same situation as Kyle, which basically was, well, we'll use you as a moniker for conservative white media. In the Joker's case, they're using him as a moniker for being an anarchist who was trying to right the wrongs of society. In this case, eliminate kindness. And they basically said, listen, dude, you're going to have to play this role up. So you can either play this role up, in a way where you're not being yourself anymore. You have to be somebody totally different, or you're going to have to act like you mentally ill. And Kyle Rittenhouse was put in a position where they basically have made him a celebrity, because you can go on right now, and I've said this before, you can go on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you want to call it right now, and Kyle Rittenhouse is verified with millions of followers, y'all, for killing some white folks while trying to kill black people. That's the type of world we live in. And they mimicked that with Joker, because despite what Joker had done, him offing a bunch of people because they were mean as hell to him, this dude he had got tons of followers. This dude also was about to get him some cheeks as well too. I'm like, dude, you literally had it made. In the dominant society, you had it made. You done offed a bunch of people. You done lived this horrible life. You did all this other stuff, right? And you literally had supporters, people who had your back, people who were going to create a movement with you. And you were about to get cheeks from Lady Gaga whenever the hell you wanted to. All you had to do was put on a damn clown nose and some makeup. That's literally all you had to do. And the dominant society basically was trying to say that. And Joker didn't want to do that. He wanted to go back to normal and live the normal life. Whereas Kyle Rittenhouse took the option of being this conservative puppet, this conservative media icon. He decided to take that route and go there. Now, obviously, he was already in that direction, but it kind of went along with kind of how he was already, it kind of put further this idea that he wasn't somebody who was just, out here to be a mass murderer. He was a boy who did something that was stupid, and it was self-defense. They were trying to go that route. They showed what happened with Joker, where if he did not take that same route, that the same thing was going, that if he did not take the route that Kyle Rittenhouse took, that it was going to result in him being a liability to the dominant society. Because the dominant society, again, like I told y'all, it works in deception. They love to take this idea of a white person committing a crime and then trying to justify it in some way. And with Kyle Rittenhouse, they tried to justify it. With other serial killers, they also tried to justify it, right? And if they don't try to justify it, what they try to do is make them an icon so that they now are polarizing, that they're now interesting. Some people can like them. Some people can become fans of them, right? And so if you do not take that route, they see you as a liability. And the white supremacist will unalive their own in order to be able to keep their system up, because the whole idea is to do things that are harmful to people, whether covert or overt, and then turn around and be able to explain it away. Think about the whole idea of Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, they did a whole Netflix series on this dude, and they although people knew that he was a horrible person because of what he did, they try to polarize him a little bit as well too. You know, think about how like Jeffrey Dahmer in real life, he killed 17 people, and out of those 17 people, 11 of them were black. And Jeffrey Dahmer was also LGBT. So to some extent, the LGBT community was not trying to be associated with white supremacy, although a lot of white LGBT people are actually white supremacists as well too. They weren't trying to be associated with that movement, despite the fact that he was one of their own and he also was a white supremacist. So they were trying to move away from that. So that goes back to that thing of they'll move away from stuff or do things to justify things that may make white supremacy seem like it really is as evil as everybody is saying and as people like me are saying. But in some cases, they may also try to glorify this individual. At the same time, with the Dahmer character, in some cases, they also tried to make him seem like he was somewhat of a person who had honorable qualities. That's why they made him seem like he was a genius to a certain extent. But if you really think about it, Jeffrey Dahmer was a total damn idiot. He was an idiot that had white supremacy aid him. Think about it. Jeffrey Dahmer had his house stanking. He had his house smelling like straight up decayed bodies and shit. He was refrigerating, folks' bodies after he done sawed them up so that he could eat them later and all this other stuff. And, it was clear that, there were reports of him basically doing all of these things. Like there was, I think, a black woman who was saying that he was doing all these things. He was killing people and something wasn't right with that house. And the dominant society was just ignoring everything that he was doing, right? And it took him a long ass time to actually get caught up. It wasn't even until he was locked up and foundational black Americans done caught this dude slipping and they done off this dude that they basically got rid of him. Because the reality is that the dominant society, the white supremacists, they weren't going to really do anything about him because they let him get away with this thing for such a long time. And then eventually they had no choice but to arrest this dude. But that was because at that point he had become a liability. But the thing is that if it's something where they can kind of attach something to what this individual is doing or something like that, they can kind of pawn their rationale off on something else, which is why they did what they did with Kyle Rittenhouse and him still being a serial killer in real life. But going back to what I was saying, though, they try to use this trope in different TV shows and movies to make it so that this individual is humanized, they are fetishized, and they are polarized as well too. Anyway, y'all, hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come, so stay tuned. Other than that, I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's day, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.